All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. My name is Goy, if you don't know me, also known as Goyanes, and I am pretty well known in TMP's roleplay scene for my prolific world building skills, and I'm here to share with y'all my thoughts on it. So let me start with this. By far, the most common question and response I get to my world building is LMAO Goy, why? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark. Here's why. I find world building to be very fun, but it's definitely not for everybody, and there's a lot of people who don't like world building or not very good at it, and I don't blame them. It's somewhat of an acquired taste. Some people prefer to stay more to the character RP side. Some people like to almost exclusively world build. But that's besides the point. I feel that I have achieved my goal of roleplay when I can envision a place with so much detail and realism that you could basically put your country in our modern world and nothing would seem out of place for the most part. And some people have other goals in RP, as I just said, but this one is mine, and hopefully it can be yours too after this lecture. So to our first point, how do you decide what to world build? That's like a common question people have because world building is kind of a daunting task, especially when you've been browsing sort of II wikis or like the really well done nationstates.net factbook pages. You start to see that like a lot of people have like these insane pages on there. And when you're a newcomer to RP, that can be really daunting, especially if you don't know how to do graphic design or you don't think you're creative enough, etc. My basic best answer to this is that you should stay away from sort of like comparing yourself or like doing these like big world building checklists per se. But yes, you should always cover the basics, like getting a flag, getting a currency name, like a capital city, all that stuff. Because that's the basic stuff. You need that to do almost everything in character RP. But I think world building should be treated almost like a conversation. The topics you world build can change. Like one day, you're world building like railways, and then the next day you're doing road signs, and the next day you're doing like a store chain in your country. And that's what's fun. You world build things as they become relevant, and that's why Discord is such an important part of this because like it allows you to share with other people, the world building aspects of your country, and it allows you to get new ideas and inspiration for what to world build yourself. And you could always start something and post it to world build, which it helps your peers in your RP community world build too, because it gives them ideas on what to world build, and that's always good. So I find the best inspiration personally for what to world build is your everyday experiences in life. I think they really can capture what the average citizenry in your country will experience. So, as an example, I go to a department store to get some clothes, right? Pretty standard, right? Just an everyday thing. Then I come home, do other stuff, and then I log back onto, Discord, nation states, whatever, and I'm thinking, what would a department store be like at Goyanes? It's like an interesting aspect. Sure, it might not be relevant to like an ongoing RP, but it's always a way to make a country more, detailed, and it makes it seem like more of a real place, not just a thing in an online game that you play. So I write up some stuff. I get some pictures. I make some logos, It's always good to, if you're going to world build, go the whole 9 miles because it makes your world building better. And every time you do that, your world building quality improves. So it's always a building process. Everything you do is a stepping stone to the next thing. So whether it be actually world building the store or maybe the brands that they sell in the store, it all adds to the realism of the country, and it's always a net positive usually. So that leads me to the next point. How do I design and world build for realism? And this is always a big question because, it's some people find it hard to make things realistic, and some people just don't want to be realistic. And that's the whole beauty of it. You can do what you want. But I personally feel that the best world building comes when you are aiming for realism. You want to be unique, but you also want to be grounded in reality. Because I feel when you stray a bit too far from that, it starts to sort of degrade the quality of your world building. But that's my opinion. But so I start when I world build for realism, when I design for realism, I start looking at realism. So that will inform how I make a design decision that makes the most sense. So for example, if I'm making an airline logo, I look at existing airline logos. I look at what their cabins look like. Getting these design cues that are grounded in reality, it helps make your whatever you're doing more realistic. Um, it helps to choose color palettes, font choices, logo design. And, and this extends because like what this is more, good design choices. But I feel like for world building to be very realistic, you also need to sprinkle in some bad design choices. Because if you look at real life, not every logo is like a perfect masterpiece of design that would send, the creators of Helvetica into the greatest fit of ecstasy, But sometimes you need to make bad design choices, and that's how you create like the best sort of, realism. So like as a metaphor, the story of the ugly duckling. That ugly duckling could be like an ugly logo, for example, right? But it's going to transform your country and like the lore about it into like this beautiful, realistic swan, which is good because if everything is perfect in your country, it starts to become sort of Mary Sue, and nobody wants to be a Mary Sue. Yeah, it's good to be a nice developed country, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're gonna be a Mary Sue. So that's why you sprinkle in these bad design choices, bad name choices. Not obviously what I mean by bad design choices and bad name choices is not to like plagiarize people, but like uh, you know, maybe put words on a flag. I know that flies right in the face of what Heighton uh spends a whole lecture on, but maybe you need to put words on a flag. Maybe not everything is perfect because sometimes having things that are rough around the edges makes it like a net positive. So as an example here, let me get a logo for my customs agency in my RP nation of Goyanes. So 1 second. Here we go. Words on a flag, logo on a flag. Kind of. I mean, the color fit, but like it's sort of sharp. But this is like a purposely bad flag. It definitely it flies in the face of all sort of conventional vexillology rules, and but that's what makes it good. It makes your country seem more realistic because not everything is going to be done by the most talented graphic designers, right? You need to like sort of sprinkle in the bad stuff. But moving on to my next point, I hate the comment when people say I am bad at graphic design because everybody always starts out as being bad at graphic design. Nobody's perfect from the start. Neither was I. When I started Nation States almost 4 years ago now, um, I was horrible. I could barely even draw my map claim to get onto Eris. But it's all about use and disuse. If you consistently use the tools you have, like GIMP or Paint.net or whatever you use, if you consistently use these tools, you will get better at them and you will learn how to do things that look great, And you don't always need to make original stuff. You could always go on to, Wikimedia Commons and see what's, not copyrighted and start, editing existing logos because that'll give you the experience you need to, like create better graphic design elements, and go on YouTube, watch tutorials, read PDFs about the software, it's all going to add up together and it's going to help you get better, with whatever software you use. And now like as Esp just said, he started using GIMP a year ago. Now he makes some really good terrain maps. If you all want to hit him up, he's great shit. But yeah, you have to use it. You have to be confident. You can't just sit there and whine about not being good at it. You got to be proactive. Like you gotta, like you gotta give it your all, man. Because like you're not gonna get better if you don't. And sitting at the bottom isn't fun for anyone. Next point: posting pictures. Posting pictures is sort of like it's a cliche thing about world building. Yeah, you go into your region's world building channel and you post a picture, for example, of like a tank or a car or something, and be like, oh, this is a common car, and that's it. That's all you post. Or this is a tank used in XYZ war. And that's all you post. That's sort of like non-substantive. Like you've just linked a picture to like a line of text and said that this is what your country is. When you should should go more. Maybe try to make it into a paragraph, like make a paragraph that goes with the picture you just posted. Maybe say, like, oh, this car was designed by this company and it sold well during these years because it had these features. That's how you add substance to your world building. That's how you get detailed world building. Because what it does is it not just, associates a picture with a concept, but it also adds all these other concepts that make it seem more realistic. It makes it seem like it's something actually from real life. And that's important, especially when your goal is to aim for realism in world building. That's great. That's what you should be doing, because it's going to improve your world building and the quality of your work all around. Because you might not need to use it for your current RP, but like when you're adding the details that are going to make your next RP great, you can sprinkle in details like that, and it makes it so much better, because the quality of your writing will improve as well when you can throw in these details. You can paint with words, basically. So that's a secondary goal. So just remember, like any world building for the most part is good, and you should always try to go more do some more world building. And I say for the most part because there are some things that should not be world built. I don't need to elaborate. You know what it is. Like, please don't do it. It's just embarrassing for you and embarrassing for everybody around you. Like, just don't do it. There's some things better left unsaid. But in conclusion, these concepts sort of influence my world building, and I hope you can take something from it. So I'm going to open it up to questions now. Just ping me with your questions so I can see it and keep sort of like a running log of it. So yeah, let's get started on questions. Make sure to ping me, please, so I can, see it and respond accordingly. I don't want to leave anyone unanswered. It's always suspenseful watching the little typing dots on the bottom of it. All right, first question from Occlusia. Question about your world building on airlines. Is there any certain airline that you made custom, for example, with logo about everything you spent many hours on? Yeah, definitely. The flag carrier for my country, Luftreederei, it's completely custom for the most part. The plane designs I use come from a website called norebo.com, NOREBBO.com, and it's a guy that I bought. I bought the PSD templates from him because it's always good to support artists, and they're Creative Commons, so you can edit them as long as you're not making money from the designs and stuff like that. That's what I use for my templates. But I created logos, and I even went so far as to create even boarding passes, because it helped me flesh out what the airline was like. I got to create service classes, so like business class and first class and all that, and what that looks like and stuff like that. And I even created an airline alliance with 2 other people on Eris. I have spent definitely many hours on that, many late nights, sort of just refining it. It's currently in its 4th design iteration. I think world building is sort of like engineering, where it's like a constantly iterative process. You do something and you're always asking yourself, how can I improve this? Because it's a never-ending process. Nothing is really set in stone, after all. This isn't real life. But you're trying to be like real life. So, at least in my opinion, some people would differ with me on that. But by constantly iterating, you can see how the design has improved and become more realistic. And I'm very content with the state it's at now. So I hope that answered your question. Next question, Kyle. I'm curious about things you should not world build. Can you give me an example? Okay. Anything that's 18 plus, yeah, is definitely a no-no. Things that are touchy subjects. So Pry went into a detailed lecture about how to RP fascism. And one of his points was you have to be sensitive with what you talk about. That definitely applies here. Be sensitive. Think before you post something. That goes, such a long way in ensuring that things that shouldn't be touched are not touched. Think, is this really something that the community will benefit from? And I think you kind of get the point. There is somebody in our NS RP community that we sort of we sort of think to ourselves every time he does this stuff, is like, did you really need to world build that? And it's like, I get that question a lot, but it's usually in a positive way. It's like minutia, but like, this is like, did you really need to world build that? Because it's such like a negative thing. It's like come on, man. Like, the quality of Eris has had a net decrease because of what you've done. I hope that answered your question. If I didn't, please let me know and I will get back to you. Next question, Esplandia. Whenever I start world building a new nation, I always think of a theme, something that sets it apart or makes it unique. When you start world building, what do you do first? Definitely that. That's one of the things that I start thinking, because I feel like having a theme for your nation sort of informs other choices you'll make, such as language or design, and your flag and your cultural things that make your country unique. And that's what you said. Thinking of a theme, your theme can be pretty broad, like, oh, I want my country to be sort of a Western European sort of country, or I want to be an Asian country. But, or like, I want to be a country that is impoverished and has just come out of a horrible war. Whatever you choose to do, I feel like starting off with choosing a theme for your country is always good, because it will help you when you got to make other stuff, because then you end up like with like some really like disjointed stuff, like, and it just doesn't end up making sense in the end. You know what I mean? Next question, Justinian. I'm on a tight schedule when it comes to RPing, with maintaining grades, a job, and sports. In your opinion, is there one subject that I should prioritize world building? No, prioritize whatever you want. I prioritize a lot of transportation-related world building. So I've done a lot of world building into my train systems, airlines, stuff like that, and infrastructure in my country, But I think you should prioritize whatever is relevant to RP at the current moment if you're in sort of a time crunch like that. So whether it be your government, I think prioritizing government, especially when you're early on in your country, is always good, because, that is a lot of the political RP is probably the most common type of RP. And as a result, if you don't have a world-built government, or at least a semi-world-built government, you're going to run into problems when you need to do posts, because things aren't going to be coherent and other stuff. So it depends. When you're early on, I definitely think government is something that you should really world build on. And then as you move on, you can sort of get into culture and other sort of minutiae. But that's definitely what I think works, at least early in your process of creating a nation. Next question, Johan Holdo. How do you integrate religion into your nation? This is a tough question. There are some people who definitely who make religion like the most defining element of their culture, and there's some people who just are secular nations. Integrating religion into your nation is more a question of integrating religion into your culture, and that sort of seeps into other things, like because how do we say this? It's sort of like it winds its way into other things. Like, if you have a very religious country, design elements are probably going to be more conservative in taste. There's going to be less flashy stuff. The average person will dress in a less flashy way, and that's sort of like how you could integrate religion. You could also integrate it into your laws, into your government. You can establish a state religion, or have sort of like laws that are rooted in religious practices, like making laws against apostasy, for example, etc. I think that's sort of how you integrate religion into your nation. But I think that's definitely something that you should look at real life parallels for, because that's the best way you're going to be able to do it. Next question, Strixia. What's the best way to solve a significant world-building conflict? For example, 2 or more players have world-built conflicting things whose content therefore cannot coexist. Would you mind elaborating on that, please? Like, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask. Like, I'm not sure what you mean by, like, content that cannot coexist. In the meantime, I will get back to your question when you can elaborate on that, but I will move on to Coromina's question real quick. I worry that my RP will die because it's not the standard type of nation. Being so different scares me. I'm used to it in TMP, but I worry nonetheless because of the community's turbulence. LOL. Being unconventional is part of what makes your nation great, and I say being unconventional not in the standard of like my nation's population is full of like fairies, but like more like, oh, we have like a sort of like non-conventional culture, you know? That's what makes it interesting. But you should be worried that your RP will die, because I feel like when you world build stuff and you find inspiration for world building stuff, you can also find inspiration for RPs. And you know, your RP doesn't always have to be some sort of like political intrigue, you know, drama fest. It can be, you know, it could be a slice of life. It could just be, you know, what's my citizen's daily life going to be? And you could write a good couple paragraphs on that, you know. But always, I think you should always seek help from the peers in your community, because they're such a great resource. And after all, RP is a collaborative event, and you should never go about it alone. Going back to Sear's question about, I'm going to restate his question real quick. What's the best way to solve a significant world-building conflict? For example, 2 or more players have world-built conflicting things whose content therefore cannot coexist. And he means 2 pieces of world-building from different players which contradict each other. So like 2 historical points that contradict, or 2 different accounts of what a character did by different players. I think the best way to do this is kind of just go in and work it out in PMs. Try to come up with like a compromise, but remember, you own your characters, and RP is collaborative. So if you don't approve of what somebody is doing with your character or with your nation, you always have the right to say, no, I don't like this. I do not consent to what you are doing with my intellectual property. I know that sounds pretentious as fuck, but like, you know, that's how you do it. And if you know if things start to go downhill, contact moderation. You know, they're a resource. They're there to help you. They're not there to hurt you. You know, like, trust the resources you have that are provided by your region, like your moderation, you know, etc. How next question from Fiji. How can world building help you explore your characters? As I said earlier, world building can help you see how they would run their daily life, but it could also inform how your characters have viewpoints on different things, like what political parties they support, or for example, or like how they feel about certain elements in your country. You know, it can help create a sort of personality for your character that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to create. You know, it's definitely interesting. Like, a lot of people would disagree that world building is sort of useless, but like, I feel like it's the backbone of sort of the different elements of RP, and it's what brings it all together. Next question. Let's see. Fiji again. Whenever I've world built in the past, I end up creating isolated details about my nation, and it feels both disjointed and stale. How can I avoid that? Keep world building. Don't give up. Because as you keep world building, you start to fill in those gaps. And, you know, it helps when you have consistency over a period of time. You know, you can really start to fill in the details. I definitely would not be able to have Goyanes as detailed as it is now if I did not, you know, keep going at it. You know, the reason why Goyanes comes across as such like a detailed country is I've been doing this for several years at this point. I've had time to fill in all the details. So I definitely think, you know, don't give up. Keep going at it. You know, eventually you will fill in those details. And if you feel, you know, that it's disjointed, just go ahead, try to fill in those details. Don't wait for people to like ask you. Be proactive about it, you know? That's the best way to go about that stuff. Next question from Ecclusia. May I ask what world building for non-canon events like the Super Cup? Thank you for the congratulations on winning. For world building non-canon events like the Super Cup is like, for reference for people not from TMP, the Super Cup, TMP this year hosted an in-character World Cup where teams from various nations played against each other, and the Super Cup basically pitted the champions of the 2 RP universes, Strange, Real, and Eris against each other. I won. I represented Eris. What could your protocol for world building that be? you got when you world build non-canon stuff, you got to keep in the back of your head that it is non-canon. So you have to kind of like know that certain things are not going to make sense. And that's kind of weird to think about, especially since I've, you know, been saying this whole lecture that you should be realistic about what you do. But you got to keep it in the back of your mind that certain things aren't going to make sense and that that's okay for the purposes of the RP. And it gets a bit complicated, especially when you have universes that aren't, parallels in how they treat realism. For example, like the team I was playing from Strange Real was a team of amateur waitresses who had banded together, versus my team, who was a bunch of professional soccer players. So you got to keep that in the back of your head that when you do non-canon RP, especially between universes, it's not going to be realistic. But when you keep it inside the same universe, like we have had certain non-canon RPs before inside of eras, yes, you kind of got to keep it in the back of your head that certain might not work, right? But you should still give it your best, even though it's non-canon, it's always a chance for you to improve your skills that you have right now and to get better. And that's how you keep improving. Because non-canon role plays and events, are sort of just like chances for you to improve. They're like scrimmages for sports teams and practices. They allow you to improve what you have, expand. Maybe you get new ideas for stuff, that type of thing. Johan Holdo, how do I world build? I have so many ideas, but no ideas how to put them together into a flowing description. It definitely is harder for some people than for others, and I will just say that right off the bat. Some people are definitely more adept at character RP, and I will say that firsthand. I am not really like a good character RPer. Yeah, I can write, but I don't get the same pleasure from doing character RP as I do, world building. And it's a two-way street. I would say if you're hitting sort of like a writer's block on world building, I would feel like try to narrow it down to a specific topic and sort of like see how it works in real life. And don't be afraid to copy things from real life. You don't need to be 100%, original. So like if you're like, oh, like this is how this works in France, for example, maybe that's how I want to have it work in my country. Because yeah, you're not always going to be an expert on what you're world building. I'm not a political scientist, but I've sort of figured out how like certain things work in politics by reading online about how these things work. Like, you don't need to get a PhD in it by any means, but like you should, read Wikipedia articles. Wikipedia is a great resource, and a lot of academia gives it shit for being unreliable. But for these purposes, Wikipedia is a great tool because you can learn how different things work, and you can learn how to implement it in your own country without being, cut and pasted. So I feel like when you learn how these things work, and when you narrow down your topic, it really helps because you can sort of figure out how you can integrate it into your country better. And it doesn't always need to have the most beautiful like description. It can be, it can be rough, but it's always a constantly iterative, improving process. And that's what like you should always work on, I hope that answered your question. I know it's definitely a hard question, How do I world build? Because like a lot of people see me do it and they think, oh, it should be easy, but then they try to and it's hard. And I completely understand that. It's not always for everybody, but I feel like by doing these things you can sort of improve. Moving on though, from Sirixia, what is your favorite type of world building aside from transportation? And what is your least favorite type? And for both, why? My favorite type of world building aside from transportation is definitely cities. I love world building my cities, especially my pride and joy Goyanes, my capital city. I feel like it's just such like a cool thing because it combines all these aspects, like because it combines business, it combines transportation, it combines like the daily life of your citizens, it combines all these different things. And if it can even combine government, and it can combine graphic design, because you got to make flags and coat of arms for these places. So I feel like world building my cities is such a cool thing, because I can definitely experiment how I want things to be. And, you can even create sort of almost local cultures and local things that are, pertaining to these cities. They're almost nations within nations, if you want to think about it that way. I definitely feel that that's a lot of fun. My least favorite type of world building, I think, is probably like I like all world building, but I definitely have some ones I don't want, like, particularly. I don't like. Here we go. I don't like really world building my legal system. Yes, I have written the constitution for my country, and yes, I have an understanding about how my legal system works, and I can provide you a description of certain things if you want. But it's not my particular favorite. I never was a fan of legalese and all that stuff, even in real life. Kind of ironic, considering I'm TMP's attorney general. But I never found it, particularly enticing to me. Although I'll do it if it warrants it. And addressing why transportation, I've addressed why legal world building is not my favorite, but transportation is my favorite just because I'm a sort of transportation junkie in real life. Like in my free time, sometimes I fucking go drive to to a parking lot that's by the airport and go take pictures of airplanes. And I fucking love riding trains in real life. I've always been like this ever since I was little. It's just something that appeals to me. And so since I do it in nation states, it's sort of, it gives me the pleasure that I could, because like when I was little, I had, sort of these delusions that I would be able to be like a railroad tycoon or something. But as I grew older, I realized, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. But so being able to do it in nation states sort of frees me from those real life limitations, and I can sort of, expand on that to my heart's content, basically. You catch my drift? Let's see, next question from Coromina Industrial. Don't worry about asking two questions, but is there anything that you think typical corporatocracies lack or need more of, and anything they should have less of? Corporatocracies. In Eris, I don't think we have many, if not any, corporatocracies, so I'm not really familiar on them. I know it's sort of like a more popular genre now, that like things such as like Cyberpunk 2077 or like the new Blade Runner sequel that's come out. I definitely think it's like sort of up and coming and popular, especially with how our modern world is coming around. But lack or need more of. I think they need more original world building. Everybody who does corporatocracies, like, they're always dystopias, and it's like, some like stupid generic corporate name controls the world in these corporatocracies. And I feel like how a real corporatocracy would work is not one big corporation running everything, but a multitude of large corporations that sort of dominate their sector in each thing. And I feel that would sort of diversify, from a typical corporatocracy, and it would allow you to not just world build more, but it would add more detail to your nation, and it would like lead it away from like Mary Sue status. I hope that answered your question. All right, let's see. Scrolling. Here is, in your opinion, is creating a Conlang important to world building? 1 second, I need to plug in my laptop to the wall socket real quick. I'll answer the question right now. Is creating a Conlang world building? It's definitely not the most important thing, by any means. I have I've Conlang, but that's just because I didn't want to use a real life language for my country, even though the Conlang is based off of 2 real life language, or 3. It's German, Swedish, and Norwegian. That's besides the point. No, I do not think creating a Conlang is important to world building. a lot of the greatly world-built countries on Eris just use analogs of real-life languages. I don't think it's the most important thing ever, but I do commend the people who put in the work to do it. It's not the easiest task by any means. I definitely think it's one of, if not the hardest thing to world build, is definitely a language. Because not just do you have to create words, you also have to create rules and, all the cultural intricacies that go with it. But no, I do not think creating a conlang is the most important thing to world building. And even if you just use English or whatever your RP universe's analog of English is, you can still be a really well world built country. And so yeah, that kind of sums up my answer on that. Ecclesia, what was it like to work with others to create the Concord Alliance? For reference, Concord Alliance is an airline alliance that I'm a part of on Eris. It was fun. I mean, I'm sort of familiar with how airline alliances work in real life, but that's kind of related to how I'm a sort of transportation junkie. But it was fun. I mean, I had to kind of lead the way because the partners I was working with were not entirely familiar for the most part. I know they're both in here. Shout out to Sear, Sirixia, and Heighton. But I basically we did some graphic design. We laid out some stuff. To be fair, it's not as world built as some of my other companies. Sorry. But we have the basics down. That's what really matters. It was, collaborative world building is so much fun if you can do it without, stress and conflict with other players. But, sometimes you can't avoid conflict, and that sucks. Anyways, next question. How do I make realistic metro lines from Johan Hold? Start with modifying real-life systems. That's the best way to put it. Wikimedia Commons is a great place to find, sort of like maps of existing systems that don't look like the official maps of the systems because maybe they use a different design language or something. But a lot of the times you can rotate and mirror them and stuff like that. And you can start by making metro lines like that. I definitely don't think there's a good software unless you have like Illustrator from Adobe, which is I cannot use because I do not have disposable income. That's besides the point. I definitely don't think you'll be able to make real good, nice metro lines from scratch otherwise. So what I do is that I get existing metro systems, like alternative fan-made maps of these systems, and I manipulate them to my heart's content. I rotate them, I mirror them, I like use layers like on GIMP to create new lines and stuff like that, and I add stations and I do other things so that the end product doesn't, and I even alter the geography in some cases so that the end product doesn't look like or should not resemble what the original thing was. And that's how I create my realistic metro maps, And I also think you got to keep it in proportion to what your city is. If you've got like a city that's like 1 million people, you should not have like a metro system to the scale of Shanghai that's created for like a city of like 10 times the size. I keep it realistic in that regard. And don't put 500 stations unless you absolutely have to, That's my opinion. Eastern Goyanes has lakes, but not that many. Goyanes just has lakes here. What's the climate like in Goyanestan? Northeastern U.S., I'd say, is a good comparison. So hot summers, freezing cold winters, that type of shebang. It looks like I've answered all the questions. So I think I'm going to conclude it here. If anybody has any questions, any remaining questions, big thank you. Oh, what are the plugs like in Goyanes? They're like British plugs. I think they're called Type G. Just from like an electrical engineering standpoint, British plugs are vastly superior to like most of the world's plugs, just for safety purposes and like because they have a fuse integrated into the plug. Other stuff I won't get into. So yeah, climate in Goyanes is basic climate, so northern/central European climate. So mild summers, very cold winters, lots of snow, winter wonderland in the later part of the year. But like still nice in the summer, nice, very comfortable springs and falls, that type of stuff. I will pronounce your name right, Koromina. I hope that satisfied you. Oh, well, that sucks, Johan. I think I'm going to conclude my lecture here. Thank you guys for coming. It really makes me happy that a lot of people, want to learn about world building. It's definitely my favorite thing. I'm probably going to be the next couple of hours on the TMP RP server and in the voice chat there. If anybody wants to continue the talk over there, please feel free to ask me questions. I will not get mad. I love answering your questions. Thank you to Fiji for recording this. Thank you to Ged and Pridania and all the other mods and admins for helping set this year's symposium up. I love the symposium. It's a bigger recruitment drive. We get a lot of new ideas and new peoples joining each other's RP universes, and I think it's just a lot of fun. Thank you guys for coming out again. It really makes me happy to see so many people interested in this. But yeah, I'm going to be on the TMPRP TMPRP's voice chat for the next couple hours. If anybody wants to drop by over there. Thanks again, and good night, everyone.
On behalf of the TNP Ministry of Culture and Greater Dianastad, thank you all for stopping by, and thank you to Goy for agreeing to give this lecture. It was very well done, and I am very happy to see that so many people turned out for it. So thanks again to everyone involved.